Another momentous week here at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Members backed new measures aimed at fighting organized crime and adopted new EU-wide health and safety guidelines on the use of high-risk medical devices. Burmese opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi was finally able to come here to Strasbourg to collect the Sakharov Prize 23 years after it was awarded to her. Meanwhile, the Civil Liberties Committee has agreed to tougher restrictions on the online use and storage of EU citizens' personal data. We start our coverage, though, on medical devices. New revised rules adopted in Parliament will help improve the certification and monitoring process of agencies which inspect and approve all forms of medical devices. Quite often, such devices include tests for diabetes, even online testing for DNA samples. These tests are often of poor quality and lead to false and thus dangerous medical conclusions for EU citizens. Rapporteur and member of the EPP group Peter Liese cited a faulty German HIV test carrying the CE stamp of approval as just one example.
That means the test would say, for example, that there was no virus, but in reality the patient was already infected with HIV from all corresponding sources, for example, from a blood transfusion or sexual contact. So the current legislation is not sufficient, it doesn't sufficiently protect patients, and we need to make improvements. I'm very pleased that we have broad consensus on many of these aspects.
Nearly a dozen recent audits of agencies have led to the temporary suspension of 2 of them, as well as the removal of some dangerously misleading testing devices. Manufacturers and vendors of such devices would also come under closer scrutiny through the setup of an EU portal for reporting serious incidents, according to EPP Group member Mairead McGuinness.
But we also need much tighter post-market surveillance, so that when a problem is detected, there's feedback of that information right through the system, and there is a rapid reaction to it. I think that's crucial for effective regulation of medical devices.
Tighter restrictions on testing by patients themselves, and thus not professionals, would also be implemented under the revised rules. EPP members say the changes will lead to higher consumer confidence in medical testing, particularly for high-risk illnesses, as well as increased industry innovation. Parliament also approved a final report setting out an ambitious action plan aimed at fighting organized crime and the money laundering which sustains it. 18 months in the making, the report recognizes organized crime's drain on the European economy, by some estimates accounting for 120 billion euros or 4 to 5% of untaxed GDP, as well as the dire human cost extracted. Salvatore Iacolino, rapporteur of the report and EPP member, said it was long past time for more coordinated EU efforts to stamp out mafia-related corruption.
We hope that the adoption of this report will present us with a new shared challenge to deal with cross-border crime and with mafia organizations and their corruption and money laundering.
Among the areas Iacolino highlighted were drugs, small arms, and human trafficking, and he made pointed reference to the trafficking of death by those who sought profit to bring refugees to the shores of Europe via Lampedusa and other EU frontier outposts.
We want our economies to be legal. We want entrepreneurs to be able to compete freely and fairly in any member state for markets. And we want to exclude companies that have received final convictions for organized crime or for abuses within public procurement procedures.
The final report also calls for the criminalization of sports rigging and match fixing. It also calls for a European Day of Memory every year on October 23rd, the date of the report's adoption this week, to remember all the victims of organized crime. She won the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought in 1990, the year her party won historic free elections, results which were ignored by the ruling military regime which had jailed her. Now, 23 years later, Aung San Suu Kyi was able to come here to Strasbourg to accept the honor. It was a long time coming, with 15 years of house arrest along the way. But her message on freedom of thought was timeless.
Freedom of thought begins with the right to ask questions. And this right, our people in Burma have not had for so long that some of our young people do not quite know how to ask questions.
Aung San Suu Kyi then eloquently concluded by thanking Europe's citizens, through its elected representatives in Parliament, for their support in her long fight against political oppression.
I would like to say that there will come a time when our people too can make our own contribution to the world. I'm confident that the young people of Burma now will one day be valued citizens of the world, helping to promote those rights and those achievements of which Professor Sakharov would have approved. Thank you.
And finally, new action was taken by the Civil Liberties Committee as part of wider data protection legislation aimed at protecting EU citizens' personal information online, regardless of where it is stored in the world. Axel Voss, EPP group member and rapporteur for the Committee for Civil Liberties, said the measures approved would send out a strong signal.
The signal is we would like to have the data protection for the citizens and on the other hand the business models for the companies.
Those measures would not only allow citizens the right to erase their personal data from commercial servers, they would also levy heavy fines which could amount to billions of euros on the larger technology companies which do not comply. If agreement is reached in upcoming negotiations with the European Council, a final vote could take place in Strasbourg in coming months. That's all for now from the Strasbourg plenary session. See you again soon in Brussels. In the meantime, find out more about the political activities of Parliament's largest political force by going to eppgroup.eu. Thanks for looking at.